bear cub was in the middle of busy highway. What this human baby did will shock you. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The afternoon sun beat down on Interstate 75, turning the asphalt into a shimmering river of heat. Cars raced by in endless streams, their engines roaring and tires screeching against the hot pavement. It was Friday, and everyone wanted to get home. Everyone except Olivia Reed, who sat trapped in the back seat of her parents' SUV, strapped tightly in her car seat. At just 11 months old, Olivia couldn't understand why they had stopped moving. All she knew was that her father, Nathan Reed, kept hitting the steering wheel, and her mother, Rachel, was on her phone trying to find another route. The car's air conditioning struggled against the summer heat, and sweat beaded on Nathan's forehead as he peered through the windshield at the sea of brake lights ahead. "This is ridiculous," Nathan muttered, loosening his tie. "There must have been an accident up ahead." Rachel nodded, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. "Traffic reports say it's backed up for miles. We're going to be here for a while." Olivia didn't care about the traffic. Her attention had wandered to the window beside her, where the world outside moved in slow, fascinating bursts. She watched as birds soared overhead, free from the gridlock below. She giggled when a butterfly fluttered past her window. Then something else caught her eye. In the grassy median that separated the northbound and southbound lanes, a small brown shape stumbled into view. At first, it looked like a dog, but as it moved closer, Olivia could see it wasn't a dog at all. It was a tiny bear cub, no bigger than her family's golden retriever. Its fur was matted and dirty, and its movements were unsteady as it wobbled along the edge of the median. Olivia's eyes widened. She'd seen bears in her picture books, in the animated movies her parents put on the TV, even behind glass at the zoo. But never like this, never so close, never so small and afraid. The cub paused at the edge of the median, its tiny black nose twitching as it sniffed the air. Cars continued to speed by in the opposite lanes, missing the small creature by inches. The cub flinched with each passing vehicle, its ears flattening against its head. Olivia watched, fascinated and horrified at the same time. She didn't understand the danger, but something inside her recognized the fear in the cub's movements. She began to kick her legs against her car seat, trying to get her parents' attention. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Rachel asked, turning around to check on her daughter. "Are you getting restless?" But Olivia's eyes remained fixed on the window, her little hand pointing urgently at the bear cub. Her face scrunched up with concern as she let out a distressed, "Bah! Bah!" Rachel followed her daughter's gaze, squinting through the glass. When she spotted the cub, her hand flew to her mouth. "Nathan, there's a bear cub in the median." Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the area until he spotted the small brown form now venturing dangerously close to the edge of the highway. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Where's its mother?" As if in answer to his question, a piercing cry cut through the air. Not from the cub, but from Olivia. It wasn't her usual cry of hunger or discomfort. This was different, urgent, almost pleading. She stretched her arms toward the window, her fingers splayed as if trying to reach through the glass to the cub outside. Rachel and Nathan exchanged worried glances. The traffic hadn't moved an inch in the last 5 minutes, and the cub was now stepping onto the actual highway, its tiny paws touching the scorching asphalt. "Someone needs to do something," Rachel whispered, her voice tight with concern. "It's going to get hit." Nathan watched as a pickup truck in the fast lane swerved to avoid the cub, honking loudly. The sudden noise sent the frightened animal scurrying back toward the median, but it was clearly disoriented. It spun in a circle, unsure which way to go as more cars approached. Olivia's cries grew more insistent. Tears streamed down her chubby cheeks as she watched the cub's plight. Something about the baby's distress seemed to reach beyond normal baby fussing. It was as if she truly understood the danger the cub was in. "We have to help it," Nathan decided, putting the car in park and unbuckling his seatbelt. "We can't just sit here and watch it get killed." Rachel grabbed his arm. "Nathan, you can't just run out into traffic. What about the mother bear? She could be nearby." Nathan hesitated, his hand on the door handle. "I don't see any other bears. And if we don't do something, that cub won't survive long enough for its mother to find it." As they debated what to do, the cub made another attempt to cross the highway. This time, it made it halfway across the lane before freezing in terror as a semi-truck bore down on it, horn blaring. The driver slammed on his brakes, tires squealing on the hot pavement. Olivia let out a shriek so loud that both her parents jumped. Her face had turned bright red, and her entire body trembled with emotion as she watched the scene unfold through the window. And then something remarkable happened, something neither Nathan nor Rachel could later explain. The cub, ears perked at the sound of Olivia's cry, turned its head toward their car. For a brief moment, the frightened animal's eyes seemed to lock with the baby's through the glass. The connection lasted only seconds, but in that moment, a strange calm came over Olivia. Her screams subsided to soft whimpers, and she reached toward the window with newfound purpose, her fingers opening and closing as if beckoning the cub. And to Nathan and Rachel's astonishment, the cub began to move. Not toward the deadly traffic, but along the edge of the highway, directly toward their car. The cub's movements were cautious but deliberate. It stumbled a few times on the uneven ground, its small paws struggling to find purchase on the loose gravel. Yet it kept coming, as if drawn by some invisible force connecting it to the baby in the car. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Rachel whispered, her hand clutching Nathan's arm so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "It's like it heard her." Nathan couldn't tear his eyes away from the scene. The traffic around them remained at a standstill, a blessing in disguise as it gave the cub a safer path toward them. But the lanes going in the opposite direction still flowed with speeding vehicles, creating a dangerous barrier between the animal and the safety of the woods beyond. "What should we do if it actually comes to our car?" Rachel asked, her voice tense with uncertainty. "We can't just open the door and let a wild animal in, even if it is just a baby." Before Nathan could answer, a new sound cut through the air, the blast of a horn from a car several vehicles behind them. The driver, impatient with the delay, was venting his frustration. The sudden noise startled the cub, causing it to jump back toward the center lanes. "No!" Rachel cried out, pressing her hands against the window. Olivia, who had been momentarily calm, erupted into fresh tears. Her little body shook with sobs as she watched the cub's retreat. The connection that had been forming seemed broken by the harsh intrusion of reality. But then another vehicle joined the unfolding drama. A forest green pickup truck that had been stuck in the right lane suddenly pulled onto the shoulder, bypassing the gridlocked traffic. Its driver, a burly man with a thick beard and wearing a park ranger uniform, jumped out and assessed the situation quickly. "That's a park ranger," Nathan exclaimed, hope surging through him. "He'll know what to do." The ranger approached the median cautiously, speaking into a radio clipped to his shoulder. He seemed to be reporting the situation while keeping a careful eye on the frightened cub. Olivia had stopped crying again, her attention fixed on the ranger. Her hands pressed against the window as if trying to push through it, her breath fogging the glass in small, rapid puffs. "Should we try to help?" Nathan asked, his hand still on the door handle. "Maybe the ranger needs assistance." Rachel hesitated, torn between the desire to help the cub and concern for their safety. "What about Olivia? We can't leave her alone in the car, and we certainly can't take her out there." Nathan nodded, acknowledging the dilemma. "I'll go. You stay with Olivia." Before Rachel could protest further, Nathan opened his door and stepped out into the heat. The asphalt radiated warmth through the soles of his shoes as he carefully navigated between the stopped cars. He approached the ranger, who had noticed his approach and was now gesturing for him to stay back. "Sir, please return to your vehicle," the ranger called out, his voice firm but not unkind. "We have a potentially dangerous situation here." "I want to help," Nathan replied, stopping a respectful distance away. "That cub seems lost. Is there anything I can do?" The ranger, whose name tag read Thompson, shook his head. "The best help you can give is to stay clear. I've called for backup. We believe the mother was hit by a car earlier this morning about a mile north of here. This cub has been wandering since then." The news hit Nathan like a physical blow. The cub was an orphan, lost and alone on a deadly highway with no mother to protect it. The thought made his chest tight with emotion. Back in the car, Rachel had rolled down her window to hear the conversation. Olivia, sensing the change in the air pressure, turned her attention from the cub to the open window. She began to fuss again, straining against the straps of her car seat as if trying to follow her father. "It's okay, sweetheart," Rachel soothed, reaching back to touch her daughter's leg. "Daddy's just trying to help the bear." But Olivia wasn't listening. Her eyes had found the cub again, which had cautiously emerged from the grass, perhaps drawn by the familiar sight of Nathan, who resembled the large human shape in her car. The cub stood at the edge of the median, its small head swiveling between the ranger and Nathan. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as extraordinary and impossible to explain. Olivia began to make a sound. Not a cry or a scream, but a soft, rhythmic cooing that carried through the open window. It was almost musical in its cadence, rising and falling in a pattern that seemed both random and deliberate at the same time. The cub's ears perked up at the sound. It tilted its head to one side, listening. Then, to the astonishment of Nathan, Ranger Thompson, and everyone watching from their cars, the cub began to approach again. This time, it moved with more confidence, its eyes fixed not on Nathan or the ranger, but on the source of that gentle cooing, the baby in the car. "Don't move," the ranger whispered to Nathan, his hand hovering near the tranquilizer gun holstered at his hip. "Something very unusual is happening here." The cub was now just a few feet away from Nathan, close enough that he could see the matted fur around its neck and the dried mud on its paws. It was small, probably only a few months old, its eyes still holding that innocent curiosity of youth despite the trauma it had experienced. For a moment, it looked directly at Nathan, its dark eyes reflecting the afternoon sun. Then it did something that made Nathan's heart skip a beat. It sat down on its haunches, like a dog waiting for a command. Behind him, Olivia's cooing had intensified. Rachel, too stunned to intervene, simply watched as her daughter seemed to communicate with the wild animal in some primal language that transcended species. "I've never seen anything like this," Ranger Thompson murmured, his hand moving away from his weapon. "It's almost like—" He didn't finish the thought, but Nathan understood. It was almost like the baby and the bear understood each other on some level that adults couldn't access, a connection untainted by fear or prejudice. The ranger's radio crackled to life, breaking the spell. A voice reported that the wildlife response team was 5 minutes out. They would bring appropriate equipment to safely capture and relocate the orphaned cub. The sound startled the cub, which scrambled back a few paces. Olivia's cooing turned to distressed whimpers as she sensed the cub's renewed fear. "What now?" Nathan asked the ranger, unwilling to move and potentially scare the cub back into traffic. "We wait," Thompson replied. "We keep it calm until the team arrives." He eyed Nathan curiously. "Your daughter seems to have a way with this little one. I've worked with wildlife for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like it." Nathan felt a surge of pride mixed with bewilderment. She's always loved animals, but this is different. As they spoke, a new commotion arose further down the highway. Horns blared and brakes squealed. Nathan turned to see what was causing the disturbance, and his blood ran cold. A second bear, much larger than the cub, had emerged from the woods on the far side of the highway. Unlike the cub, this bear moved with purpose and aggression, swatting at cars that came too close as it tried to cross the busy lanes. "Is that—" Nathan couldn't finish the question. Ranger Thompson's face had gone pale beneath his tan. "I thought the mother was dead, but that's definitely an adult female, and she looks like she's searching for something." The mother bear had somehow survived whatever accident had separated her from her cub, and now she was on a mission to find her baby, regardless of the human infrastructure that stood in her way. "Get back to your car," the ranger ordered, all gentleness gone from his voice. "Now, lock the doors and do not get out again." Nathan didn't need to be told twice. He backed away slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements that might frighten the cub. As he retreated, the cub watched him go, its head tilted in what almost looked like confusion. The mother bear was getting closer, causing panic among the drivers. Some were abandoning their vehicles, fleeing on foot down the highway away from the approaching animal. Others honked their horns or revved their engines, trying to scare the bear away, actions that only seemed to agitate her further. Nathan reached his car and slipped back into the driver's seat, locking the doors with shaking hands. "We've got a problem," he told Rachel, who had been watching the unfolding scene with growing alarm. "The mother is alive, and she's coming this way." Rachel's face drained of color. "What do we do?" "The ranger said to stay in the car and wait for the wildlife team," Nathan replied, his eyes fixed on the side mirror, which showed the mother bear's steady approach. "They should be here any minute." But the cub, which had been sitting calmly near the median, suddenly seemed to sense its mother's presence. It stood up on its hind legs, nose twitching as it caught a familiar scent on the breeze. Then it let out a high-pitched call, a sound so full of longing and hope that it made Rachel's eyes fill with tears. Olivia, who had been whimpering softly, fell silent at the cub's cry. For a heartbeat, the entire scene seemed frozen in time. The stranded cars, the approaching mother bear, the lost cub, and the human family caught in the middle of this wild drama. Then Olivia did something that would later be described by witnesses as miraculous. She reached both hands toward the window and pressed her palms flat against the glass, and she began to make that strange cooing sound again, the same rhythmic pattern she had used before, but now louder, more insistent. The cub turned toward the sound, its attention drawn back to the car, and, remarkably, it began to move again, not toward its approaching mother, but toward Olivia, as if her call was stronger, more compelling than even the pull of its own kind. "What is she doing?" Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible over Olivia's cooing. "Nathan, what is our baby doing?" Nathan could only shake his head, as mystified as his wife. "I don't know, but whatever it is, I think it might be saving that cub's life." Because the mother bear, in her desperate search for her baby, had now charged onto the highway, causing cars to swerve wildly to avoid her. One minivan skidded into the median, its tires digging deep furrows in the grass just yards from where the cub had been sitting moments before. If the cub had stayed where it was, it would have been crushed. But instead, drawn by Olivia's mysterious call, it was now huddled against the side of their car, directly beneath Olivia's window, as far from the chaos as it could get. The ranger had seen it too. He was now speaking urgently into his radio, his eyes never leaving the mother bear as she rampaged through the traffic. More rangers had arrived and were attempting to create a perimeter, warning people to stay in their vehicles. "The cub is right outside our car," Nathan told Rachel, his voice tight with tension. "If the mother sees it here." He didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew what would happen if a mother bear thought humans were threatening her cub. But the alternative, pushing the cub away, back into the danger zone, was unthinkable. Olivia seemed to sense the dilemma. Her cooing had stopped, and she was now watching the cub with an almost adult-like intensity. Her little hand remained pressed against the window, a thin barrier of glass separating her from the wild creature that had responded so strangely to her call. For its part, the cub had curled into a tight ball against the car door, its small body trembling, but seemingly trusting that this metal den would provide protection. It was a tableau that defied explanation. A human baby and a bear cub, separated by glass and species, yet connected by some deeper understanding. And then the mother bear spotted her baby. Time seemed to stop. The massive female bear froze in the middle of the highway, her powerful body suddenly still as her eyes locked onto the small form huddled against the Reed's car. A low, rumbling growl emerged from deep in her chest, audible even through the closed windows of their vehicle. "Don't move," Nathan whispered, though it was unnecessary. Neither Rachel nor he dared to breathe, let alone move, as the mother bear assessed the situation. Maybe she'll just take the cub and go. The mother bear dropped to all fours and began to approach, her movements deliberate and controlled in contrast to her earlier rampage. Each massive paw struck the ground with purpose, her eyes never leaving her cub or the car it was pressed against. Inside the car, Olivia had fallen completely silent. She stared through the window at the approaching bear with an expression that seemed impossibly mature for her 11-month-old face. A look of concentration and something else. Something almost like recognition. "Nathan," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. What if she attacks the car to get to her cub? It was a terrifying possibility. The mother bear was easily 6 feet tall when standing, with claws that could tear through metal if she was determined enough. And nothing was more determined than a mother protecting her young. The Rangers had noticed the standoff developing. Ranger Thompson was speaking into his radio again, his free hand signaling to his colleagues who were now positioning themselves with tranquilizer guns. But they were caught in a dangerous balance. Too close, and they might provoke the bear to attack. Too far, and they wouldn't be able to intervene if the situation turned violent. The mother bear was now just 15 feet from their car, close enough that Nathan could see the scars on her face and the matted blood in her fur from whatever accident had separated her from her cub earlier. She was injured, but moving with the singular focus of maternal instinct. "The windows are up, the doors are locked," Nathan said, trying to reassure himself as much as Rachel. "Even if she tries to get in, we should be safe until the Rangers can tranquilize her." Rachel nodded, her eyes never leaving the bear. "What about the cub, though?" "It's right outside Olivia's door, if the mother tries to reach it." She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. If the mother bear tried to retrieve her cub, she would almost certainly damage their car in the process, putting Olivia in danger. The cub, sensing its mother's approach, had uncurled slightly from its protective ball. It lifted its head, its small black nose twitching as it caught her scent. But surprisingly, it didn't run to her. Instead, it remained pressed against the car door, as if torn between the familiar pull of its mother and the strange connection it had formed with the human baby on the other side of the glass. The mother bear stopped 10 feet away, her head lowered, nostrils flaring as she took in the scene. Her growl deepened, sending vibrations through the ground that Nathan could feel through the car. She took another step forward, then another. Inside the car, something unexpected happened. Olivia, who had been watching silently, suddenly raised her small hand and placed it against the window again. And then, to her parents' amazement, she began to tap the glass, a gentle, rhythmic pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap. The mother bear's ears twitched at the sound. She tilted her massive head, her focus shifting from the cub to the window, where she could now see Olivia's small form. For an agonizing moment, the bear's dark eyes met the baby's blue ones through the glass. "Oh, God," Rachel breathed, instinctively reaching into the back seat to try to pull Olivia away from the window. But the baby resisted, straining against her mother's hand to maintain her position. Outside, something remarkable was unfolding. The mother bear had stopped advancing. She remained still, her gaze fixed on Olivia, who continued her strange tapping. The cub, sensing the change in its mother's demeanor, cautiously uncurled further and took a hesitant step toward her, then stopped, as if waiting for permission. Ranger Thompson and his team had their tranquilizer guns raised, ready to fire if the bear showed any sign of aggression. But the large animal remained oddly calm, almost transfixed by the baby behind the glass. "What is happening?" Rachel whispered, her hand still on Olivia's leg. "Nathan, what is our baby doing to that bear?" Nathan shook his head slowly, unable to comprehend the scene playing out before them. "I don't know. It's like they're communicating somehow. It did seem that way." Olivia's tapping had settled into a steady rhythm, and remarkably, the mother bear's aggressive stance had softened. She sat back on her haunches, still alert but no longer advancing. The cub, sensing the change in its mother, took another tentative step toward her, then another. It paused halfway between the car and its mother, looking back at the window where Olivia continued her tapping. For a moment, it seemed as though everything might resolve peacefully. The cub returning to its mother, the bears retreating to the forest, the humans left with an extraordinary story, but no harm done. Then the wildlife response team arrived. 3 large trucks with flashing lights pulled up on the shoulder of the highway, their sudden appearance and noise shattering the fragile calm that had descended on the scene. Men and women in khaki uniforms jumped out, carrying large nets and more tranquilizer guns. The mother bear's reaction was immediate and violent. She rose to her full height, a terrifying 6.5 feet of muscle and fur, and let out a roar that seemed to shake the very air around them. The cub, startled by its mother's transformation, darted back toward the Reed's car, pressing itself once more against the door beneath Olivia. "No, no, no," Nathan muttered, watching in horror as the mother bear dropped to all fours again and charged, not toward her cub, but toward the wildlife response team, perceiving them as the greater threat. One of the team members fired a tranquilizer dart, which struck the bear in the shoulder, but the dose, calibrated for a calm capture, wasn't enough to stop a mother bear in full protective rage. She barely slowed, barreling toward the team, who scattered in panic. Ranger Thompson was shouting into his radio, trying to coordinate a response. "Hold your fire. We have civilians too close. The cub is right next to a vehicle with a family inside." The scene had devolved into chaos. The mother bear, with a tranquilizer dart protruding from her shoulder, was now tearing through the equipment the response team had unloaded, sending metal cases flying and shredding a capture net with her powerful claws. The team members had retreated to their trucks, some reaching for more powerful rifles. Not tranquilizers this time, but weapons that could stop a charging bear permanently. "They're going to kill her," Rachel realized, her voice breaking. "They're going to shoot that cub's mother right in front of it." Nathan felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. They were trapped in their car, unable to influence the deadly drama unfolding around them. The cub, sensing the danger, was now whimpering audibly, its small cries cutting through the commotion outside. But Olivia hadn't given up. Her tapping had become more insistent, her little palm slapping against the window with surprising force for such a small child. And now she was making that strange cooing sound again, louder than before, seemingly undeterred by the chaos surrounding them. What happened next would later be debated by wildlife experts, psychologists, and even paranormal researchers. The mother bear, in mid-rampage, suddenly stopped. Her head swiveled toward the sound of Olivia's cooing, her nostrils flaring as she caught a scent on the air. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, she began to back away from the response team. Not in fear, but with purpose, her eyes now fixed on her cub, and the car it was huddled against. "She's coming this way," Nathan warned, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Rachel, get Olivia away from the window." But Rachel found herself unable to move. Something about the bear's approach felt different this time. Not aggressive, not threatening, but deliberate, intentional. The bear moved slowly now, the tranquilizer beginning to take effect even if it wasn't enough to bring her down. She approached her cub, which looked up at her with what could only be described as relief. The mother bear gently nuzzled her baby, checking it over for injuries with surprising tenderness given her massive size and fearsome appearance. Then she raised her head again and looked directly at the window where Olivia sat. The baby had stopped her tapping and cooing, and was now simply watching, her blue eyes wide with what seemed like curiosity rather than fear. For several heartbeats, the bear and the baby regarded each other. Then the mother bear did something that would later be described by witnesses as impossible and unlike any known bear behavior. She placed one massive paw against the window, directly opposite Olivia's tiny hand. "Oh my God," Rachel breathed, her voice catching in her throat. "Nathan, are you seeing this?" Nathan couldn't speak. He could only watch as his daughter, his 11-month-old baby, who had only recently learned to clap her hands, placed her palm against the glass, mirroring the bear's gesture. On one side of the window, a tiny human hand, pink and soft. On the other, a massive bear paw, with claws that could tear through flesh with ease. Yet there was no aggression in the bear's posture. If anything, she seemed calm. The tranquilizer was working its way through her system, slowing her down, but there was an awareness in her eyes that couldn't be attributed to drugs. Ranger Thompson had approached cautiously, his tranquilizer gun still raised, but his finger no longer on the trigger. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured, his voice carrying through the now silent scene. "In 20 years working with wildlife, I've never—" His voice trailed off as the bear removed her paw from the window. She bent down again to her cub, nudging it gently, as if urging it to move. The cub hesitated, looking back at Olivia once more before finally responding to its mother's prompting. Together, the two bears began to move away from the car, the mother's steps becoming increasingly unsteady as the tranquilizer took fuller effect. They headed not toward the forest on the far side of the highway, which would have required crossing the still active lanes of traffic, but along the shoulder in the direction of a wooded area visible about a quarter-mile down the road. "Let them go," Ranger Thompson called to his team, who had been preparing to pursue. "The mother's been darted. She'll go down soon enough, and we can safely retrieve them both." As the bears moved away, Olivia began to fuss in her car seat. She reached toward the window, her little face scrunching up as if she might cry. But it wasn't fear that showed in her expression. It was something closer to concern, or even sorrow. "It's okay, sweetheart," Rachel soothed, finally finding her voice again. "The bears are going home. They're going to be safe now." Olivia wasn't consoled. Her fussing turned to more insistent cries, her hands still reaching for the window as the bears grew smaller in the distance. "I think she's worried about them," Nathan said, his own voice thick with emotion. "It's like she knows the mother is hurt." Rachel nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She connected with them somehow. I can't explain it, but she did. The rangers were now following the bears at a distance, ensuring they stayed on a safe path toward the woods while keeping other motorists away. The mother bear's steps were becoming visibly more labored, the tranquilizer finally overcoming her massive body's resistance. "What happens now?" Rachel asked, watching as the rangers coordinated their efforts. "Will they be okay?" Nathan reached across the console to take her hand. "Ranger Thompson said they'll take care of them. The mother will be treated for her injuries, and once she recovers, they'll be released back into the wild together." It was the best possible outcome from what could have been a tragedy, but it didn't explain what they had just witnessed, the inexplicable connection between their baby daughter and these wild creatures. As if reading their thoughts, Ranger Thompson approached their car again, signaling for Nathan to roll down his window. "Your family is safe to leave now," he said, his face still bearing the stunned expression of someone who had witnessed something beyond his understanding. "The traffic should start moving soon, but before you go, might I ask your daughter's name?" "Olivia," Rachel answered from the passenger seat. "Olivia Reed." The ranger nodded slowly, writing something in a small notebook. "Olivia," he repeated. "Well, Miss Olivia just did something I've never seen in all my years of wildlife work." He looked up from his notes, his expression earnest. "She may have saved not only that cub's life, but several human lives as well. If that mother bear had fully charged our team—" He shook his head, leaving the grim possibilities unspoken. "But how?" Nathan couldn't help asking. "How did our baby connect with those bears? She's not even a year old. She can barely say mama and data." Ranger Thompson tucked his notebook away and adjusted his hat. "Mr. Reed, there are things in nature we still don't fully understand. Ancient connections that exist between species, instincts that run deeper than language or rational thought." He glanced at Olivia, who had calmed somewhat, but was still watching the distant forms of the bears and rangers. "Sometimes I think the very young and the very old are more tuned into these connections than the rest of us." It was hardly a scientific explanation, but at that moment it was the only one that made any sense. As they prepared to continue their journey, the traffic slowly beginning to move around them, Nathan and Rachel exchanged a look full of wonder and lingering disbelief. Their daughter, still watching out the window with unusual intensity, had done something inexplicable today, something that defied explanation yet had undeniably happened. "We should probably call your mother and tell her we'll be late," Nathan said to Rachel, trying to inject some normalcy back into their day. Rachel nodded absently, her eyes still on Olivia. "What do we tell her?" "The traffic was bad because our baby had a conversation with a bear." Despite the tension of the past hour, Nathan found himself laughing, a release of the fear and wonder that had built up inside him. Maybe we just say there was wildlife on the road. Rachel smiled too, reaching back to stroke Olivia's cheek. The baby turned to look at her mother, and for a brief moment Rachel could have sworn she saw something ancient and knowing in her daughter's eyes, something that didn't belong in the face of a child so young. But then Olivia smiled her usual toothless grin and babbled, "Mama," the strange maturity vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. As they drove away, following the now moving traffic, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that they had witnessed something profound, a moment of connection between species that most humans would never experience. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Olivia, who was now contentedly playing with her stuffed elephant toy as if nothing unusual had happened. What other mysteries lay behind those innocent blue eyes? What other abilities might she possess that they had yet to discover? The questions lingered in his mind as they continued their journey, leaving behind the scene of their extraordinary encounter but carrying with them a story they would never forget, and likely never fully understand. What they didn't know as they drove away was that this incident was just the beginning. The bears would recover, the traffic would clear, and life would seemingly return to normal. But the connection that had formed that day, the inexplicable bond between a human baby and a wild creature, had set in motion a chain of events that would draw them back to this place sooner than they could possibly imagine. Because some connections once formed cannot be broken, and some mysteries once glimpsed demand to be understood. 2 miles down the highway, as the Reed family's car disappeared around a bend, the tranquilized mother bear finally collapsed in the tall grass beside the road. Rangers quickly moved in with stretchers and equipment, preparing to transport her and her cub to a wildlife rehabilitation center. As they worked, one of the younger rangers noticed something odd about the cub. Unlike most captured bear cubs, which typically cried for their mothers or struggled against human handlers, this one seemed unusually calm. It watched the humans with intelligent eyes as they tended to its mother, and when a female ranger approached to place it in a transport cage, it went willingly. But just before entering the cage, the cub turned its head, looking back down the highway in the direction the Reed family had gone. It made a soft sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whimper, that made the rangers exchange puzzled glances. "That's weird," the female ranger remarked, securing the cage door. "It's almost like it's saying goodbye to someone." Her colleague shrugged, attributing the behavior to stress or the trauma of separation and reunion. But if they could have seen inside the cub's mind, if they could have glimpsed the strange connection that had formed in those extraordinary moments, they might have understood that the cub wasn't saying goodbye. It was saying, "Until we meet again." And somewhere down that highway, baby Olivia Reed drifted off to sleep in her car seat, her dreams filled with images of forests and mountains, and a small bear cub running free among the trees, waiting for her to return. 3 weeks had passed since the highway incident. The story of the baby who communicated with bears had made local news, with a grainy cell phone video from a passing motorist going viral online. Experts had weighed in, most dismissing the apparent connection as coincidence or anthropomorphizing. A few fringe scientists suggested possibilities of interspecies communication, but their theories were largely ridiculed by the mainstream scientific community. For the Reed family, life had mostly returned to normal, or what passed for normal after such an extraordinary experience. Nathan had gone back to his accounting job at the firm downtown. Rachel had resumed her part-time work as a graphic designer, working from home while caring for Olivia. And Olivia had seemingly reverted to being a typical 11-month-old baby, babbling and crawling and exploring her world with innocent curiosity. But there were differences, subtle changes that only her parents noticed. Olivia's fascination with animals had intensified. She would sit for unusually long periods watching nature documentaries that featured bears, her usual restlessness replaced by an almost hypnotic focus. She had also developed a new habit, tapping rhythmically on her high-chair tray or the living room window, the same pattern they had observed during the bear encounter. It was a muggy Tuesday afternoon when Rachel noticed something else unusual. She was working at her desk in the home office, Olivia playing on a blanket nearby with her stuffed animals. The baby had arranged them in a peculiar formation, a circle of smaller toys surrounding her favorite teddy bear. As Rachel watched, Olivia began moving her hand in a sweeping motion over the toys, making the same cooing sound they had heard on the highway. "What are you doing, sweetie?" Rachel asked, setting down her stylus and moving to sit on the floor beside her daughter. Olivia looked up, her blue eyes holding that strange, momentary flash of something older, wiser. Then she smiled her gummy smile and returned to her game, the moment passing like a cloud shadow on a sunny day. Rachel picked up her phone and took a video, sending it to Nathan with a text. "She's doing that thing again, the bear thing." Nathan's reply came quickly. "Just a game. Kids play weird games." But they both knew it was more than that. They had discussed it late at night when Olivia was asleep. The inexplicable connection they had witnessed. The way their baby had somehow calmed two wild bears when trained professionals couldn't. They had agreed not to dwell on it, not to turn their daughter into some kind of oddity. Yet they couldn't help wondering about the meaning behind these continued behaviors. That evening, as they were preparing dinner, the local news ran a story that caught their attention. The female news anchor's voice was somber as she reported, "Tragedy at the Oak Ridge Wildlife Rehabilitation Center today, where a mother bear that had been recovering from injuries sustained on Highway 75 last month escaped her enclosure, injuring 2 staff members in the process. The bear, which had been scheduled for release back into the wild next week along with her cub, broke through a supposedly secure gate during a routine feeding. Wildlife officials are now searching the surrounding forest, warning residents to be on alert and to report any sightings immediately." Rachel and Nathan exchanged worried glances. They both knew which bear the report was referring to. "What about the cub?" Nathan asked, his hand frozen in the act of chopping vegetables. As if in answer to his question, the report continued. "In a strange twist to this story, the bear's cub, which had been housed in the same enclosure, did not follow its mother in the escape. Center staff report that the cub appeared distressed after its mother's departure, but has remained unusually calm. The cub will be kept at the center until officials determine whether reuniting it with its mother is possible or if it will need to be raised in captivity." "That poor thing," Rachel murmured, looking over at Olivia, who was in her high chair, oddly still and quiet as she watched the TV screen. "It must be so confused." Olivia was staring at the image of the bear cub that had appeared on screen. A small brown form behind a chain-link fence, looking directly at the camera with intelligent eyes. She began to tap her high-chair tray, the now familiar rhythm echoing in the kitchen. "Rachel," Nathan said slowly, noticing their daughter's reaction. "Do you think she understands what's happening?" Before Rachel could answer, Olivia did something that sent a chill running down both their spines. She pointed directly at the television screen where the cub's image was being shown and said with perfect clarity, "Bear, come." It was the first complete phrase they had ever heard her speak. Did she just... Rachel couldn't finish the sentence, too stunned by what she had just heard. Nathan nodded, his face pale. "She said, 'Bear, come.' Like she thinks the bear is coming here." They both looked at Olivia, who had returned to eating her dinner as if nothing extraordinary had happened, mashing peas with her tiny fingers and giggling at the mess. "It's just a coincidence," Rachel said, trying to convince herself. She's been obsessed with bears since the highway. She's probably been trying to say bear for days, and we just didn't hear her. "And come?" Nathan asked, his voice tight. "That's quite a second word, don't you think?" They fell silent, neither wanting to articulate the unsettling feeling that had settled over them. The idea that their baby daughter might have some kind of psychic connection to a wild animal was too bizarre, too far outside the realm of rational explanation. Yet the memory of that day on the highway remained vivid. The way the bears had responded to Olivia's sounds, the moment the mother bear had placed her paw against the window opposite Olivia's tiny hand. Those weren't things they could easily dismiss or explain away. Later that night, after they had put Olivia to bed, they sat together on the couch, the TV muted, but still showing news coverage of the bear escape. "What if—" Rachel began, then hesitated, afraid to voice the thought that had been growing in her mind. "What if what?" Nathan prompted, reaching for her hand. "What if the mother bear is looking for her cub? Or what if she's looking for Olivia?" The question hung in the air between them. Too absurd to be taken seriously, yet too disturbing to be entirely dismissed. Nathan squeezed her hand. "Bears don't think like that. They don't form connections with humans, especially not with babies they've only seen through a car window for a few minutes." "I know," Rachel nodded, feeling foolish for even suggesting it. "You're right, it's just... everything about that day was so strange. And now, Olivia's behavior, and this escape, it feels connected somehow." Nathan was about to reassure her further when a noise from outside caught their attention, a rustling in the bushes that bordered their backyard. They lived in a suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, their modest house backing up to a greenbelt that eventually led to more developed woodland about a mile away. "Probably just raccoons," Nathan said, but he moved to the back door and flipped on the patio light, illuminating the small yard with harsh white light. Nothing seemed amiss. The swing set they had optimistically purchased for when Olivia was older stood silently in the corner. Rachel's herb garden was undisturbed. The bushes at the edge of the property swayed slightly in the evening breeze, but showed no signs of an intruder. Nathan was about to turn off the light when they heard it. A low, rumbling sound that was unmistakably a growl. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. "Nathan, ... Stay inside," he ordered, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Call animal control, now." Rachel didn't move, frozen by a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You don't think..." But Nathan was already reaching for the baseball bat they kept by the back door, a precaution against human intruders that now seemed woefully inadequate for what might be lurking in their yard. Before either of them could act further, the baby monitor on the coffee table crackled to life. Through the small speaker came the sound of Olivia, not crying or fussing as they might have expected, but cooing, that same rhythmic pattern they had heard on the highway. Nathan and Rachel looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Then, moving as one, they hurried upstairs to Olivia's room, Nathan still clutching the baseball bat. They found their daughter standing in her crib, fully awake despite the late hour. She was facing the window, her hands pressed against the rails of her crib, making that haunting cooing sound. When she heard her parents enter, she turned to them with an expression of surprising alertness. "Bear," she said simply, pointing to the window. "Bear, come." Nathan approached the window cautiously, baseball bat raised. He peered through the curtains into the darkness of their backyard, his heart pounding in his chest. And there, at the edge of the light cast by the patio lamp, stood the mother bear. She was thinner than they remembered, her fur matted in places from her time in captivity. But there was no mistaking her. the same bear that had nearly charged the wildlife response team on the highway, the one that had placed her paw against their car window in that inexplicable moment of connection. "Rachel," Nathan said, his voice surprisingly steady given the circumstances, "take Olivia and go to the front of the house. Call animal control, then wait in the car with the doors locked." But Rachel didn't move. She was watching Olivia, who had stopped cooing and was now making a different sound, a series of soft whimpers that rose and fell in a distinct pattern. Outside, the bear's posture changed. She lowered her massive head, her ears flattening slightly as if in submission or recognition. Then, to Nathan's astonishment, she sat down on her haunches at the edge of their yard, her eyes fixed on Olivia's window. "She's not attacking," Rachel whispered, moving to stand beside Nathan at the window. "She's waiting." "For what?" Nathan asked, though a part of him already knew the answer. "For Olivia," Rachel said softly, "or for us to help her." It sounded crazy when spoken aloud. The idea that a wild bear would seek out a human baby for help defied everything they knew about animal behavior. Yet the evidence was right in front of them, the bear, sitting calmly in their yard, and Olivia seeming to communicate with it through the glass. "We should still call animal control," Nathan insisted, though with less conviction than before. "It's not safe to have a wild bear in our yard, no matter how calm she seems right now." Rachel nodded reluctantly. "You're right, but—" She looked at Olivia, who was still watching the bear with intense focus. "Can we wait a few minutes?" "Just to see what happens?" It was a risk, and they both knew it. But there was something so extraordinary about the scene unfolding before them that neither could bear to interrupt it just yet. For nearly 5 minutes they stood in silence, watching the tableau of baby and bear. Olivia continued to make occasional soft sounds, and the bear remained seated, patient and alert at the edge of their yard. Then Olivia said something that changed everything. "Baby bear," she said clearly, looking directly at her parents. "Help baby bear." Rachel and Nathan exchanged stunned glances. "The cub," Rachel breathed, understanding dawning. "She's here for her cub, the one still at the rehabilitation center." "And somehow Olivia knows that," Nathan added, the baseball bat now hanging limply at his side as the immediate sense of threat faded. How is that possible? There was no rational explanation, no scientific framework that could account for what they were witnessing. Yet the truth seemed inescapable. Their daughter had formed some kind of bond with these bears, a connection that transcended species barriers and logical understanding. What do we do?" Rachel asked, looking from Olivia to the bear and back again. "We can't exactly go break a bear cub out of a wildlife center." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, trying to think logically despite the surreal situation. "No, but maybe we can help in another way. Where's that ranger's card, the one who was there that day on the highway?" "Thompson," Rachel remembered, snapping her fingers. "Ranger Thompson. He gave you his card before we left." Nathan nodded. He seemed to understand that something unusual was happening. Maybe he'd be willing to listen, to help reunite them properly, through official channels. It was a long shot, but it was the only responsible course of action they could think of. They couldn't ignore the bear in their yard, but neither could they ignore their daughter's apparent plea for help. "I'll find his card," Rachel said, heading for the drawer in the kitchen where they kept miscellaneous papers. "You stay with Olivia." Left alone with his daughter, Nathan found himself oddly calm despite the bizarre circumstances. He set the baseball bat aside and picked Olivia up from her crib, carrying her back to the window. "Is that your friend out there?" he asked softly, not really expecting an answer. Olivia placed her small hand against the glass, and outside, as if responding to some silent signal, the bear rose to her feet. She approached the house with slow, deliberate steps, showing none of the aggression or fear that would be expected from a wild animal so close to humans. Nathan's heart rate quickened, but he held his ground, trusting in the strange bond that seemed to exist between his daughter and this creature. The bear stopped directly below the window, looking up at them with intelligent eyes that reflected the patio light. "Bear sad," Olivia said, her small face solemn as she looked down at the animal. "Baby bear gone." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine at his daughter's words. It was as if she was translating the bear's feelings, serving as an interpreter between species. The rational part of his mind rejected the notion immediately. Babies couldn't speak to bears, and bears couldn't communicate complex emotions to human children. Yet the evidence before his eyes was hard to dismiss. "We're going to help," he found himself saying, both to Olivia and strangely to the bear below. "We'll try to help find her baby." Rachel returned with Ranger Thompson's card in hand, her face pale but determined. "I'll call him now. He might think we're crazy, but—" She trailed off as she took in the scene at the window, Nathan and Olivia looking down at the bear, who gazed back with what could almost be described as hope in her dark eyes. "Tell him to come quickly," Nathan said, not looking away from the bear. "And tell him to come alone. No tranquilizer guns, no wildlife team, just him." Rachel nodded, already dialing the number. As she waited for an answer, she joined Nathan and Olivia at the window, completing the strange family tableau. Outside, the bear settled back on her haunches, still watching the window where the human family stood together. She made no move to leave, no sign of aggression or impatience. It was as if she understood that her message had been received and that help was on the way. For the Reed family, who had once lived the most ordinary of suburban lives, nothing would ever be quite ordinary again. They had crossed a threshold into a world where ancient connections between species still existed, where the impossible sometimes happened in backyards and on highways. And at the center of it all was their daughter, a baby with blue eyes and a toothless smile, who somehow spoke the forgotten language of the wild. As they waited for Ranger Thompson to arrive, the night settled around their house like a blanket. Stars emerged in the clear sky above, the same stars that had guided countless generations of humans and animals alike. In this moment of quiet anticipation, the barriers between wild and tame, between human understanding and animal instinct, seemed thinner than they ever had before. And in her father's arms, Olivia Reed continued her silent conversation with the bear who had traveled so far to find her. Ranger Daniel Thompson had seen many strange things during his 15 years with the Fish and Wildlife Service. He had witnessed elk mourning their dead, wolves adopting orphaned pups, and once, memorably, a deer that had seemingly formed a friendship with a family's golden retriever. Nature was full of surprises for those who paid close attention, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the phone call he received at 11:23 p.m. from Rachel Reed, or for the scene that greeted him when he arrived at the family's suburban home 30 minutes later. "Stay in your vehicle for a moment," Nathan Reed had instructed when Thompson pulled into their driveway. "She's still in the backyard. We don't want to startle her." Thompson hadn't needed to ask who she was. The urgency in Rachel's voice when she'd called, describing their daughter's strange behavior and the bear that had appeared in their yard, had convinced him that this was connected to the highway incident 3 weeks earlier. An incident that had continued to puzzle him ever since. He rolled down his window, listening to the night sounds, crickets, a distant owl, the soft rustle of leaves in the light breeze. No sounds of panic, No sign that a dangerous predator was lurking nearby. Just an ordinary summer night in an ordinary suburban neighborhood. Except that it wasn't ordinary at all. Nathan appeared at his window, his face tight with tension but his voice remarkably calm. "She's still there, just sitting at the edge of our yard, watching the house. She hasn't tried to approach further or shown any aggression." Thompson nodded, his mind racing to process this information. The mother bear, the same one that had escaped from Oak Ridge earlier that day, the same one that had nearly charged his team on the highway, was sitting calmly in a suburban backyard. It defied everything he knew about bear behavior. "And your daughter?" he asked, remembering the baby who had somehow connected with the bears during their first encounter. "Olivia's awake," Nathan replied, glancing back at the house. "She's the one who alerted us to the bear's presence. She's been communicating with it somehow." There was a hesitancy in Nathan's voice, an awareness of how bizarre this claim must sound. But Thompson didn't immediately dismiss it. He had seen enough that day on the highway to know that something extraordinary was happening here, something that fell outside the neat categories of scientific understanding. "Let me see her," he said, reaching for his equipment bag but deliberately leaving his tranquilizer gun locked in its case in the back of his truck. Something told him he wouldn't need it tonight. Inside the house, he found Rachel sitting on the living room couch with Olivia in her lap. The baby was wide awake despite the late hour, her blue eyes alert and focused on Thompson as he entered. She showed no signs of fear or distress, only a calm attentiveness that seemed strangely mature for a child so young. "Hello again, Miss Olivia," Thompson said, kneeling down to the baby's eye level. "I hear you have a visitor in your yard." Olivia regarded him solemnly, then pointed toward the back of the house. "Bear," she said clearly. "Bear, come." Thompson couldn't hide his surprise. "She's talking. She wasn't talking 3 weeks ago, was she?" Rachel shook her head. "Just baby babble until today. Now, suddenly she's speaking in phrases, specific phrases about the bear." She hesitated, then added, "She says, 'Help, baby bear.' We think the mother is looking for her cub." It sounded incredible, a wild animal seeking out a human child to help retrieve its offspring. Yet Thompson had noticed something unusual about the cub back at the center. While other bear cubs separated from their mothers would typically become aggressive or despondent, this one had remained strangely calm, as if expecting to be reunited soon. The staff had commented on it during their daily reports. "Can I see the bear?" he asked, setting his bag aside. Nathan led him to the back door, switching off the patio light before opening it. "We thought bright light might make her nervous," he explained. "The moonlight's enough to see her." Thompson stepped carefully onto the porch, his eyes scanning the shadowy yard. At first, he saw nothing. Then a darker patch of shadow moved near the bushes, and he made out the distinctive form of the female bear. She was sitting almost like a dog, her attention fixed on the house. When she saw Thompson, her posture tensed slightly. A low rumble, not quite a growl but a warning, emanated from her throat. "It's okay," Thompson said softly, using the same gentle tone he employed with injured or frightened animals. "I'm not here to hurt you." Behind him, he heard the pat of small hands on the screen door. Olivia had crawled to the door and was now watching through the mesh, her face pressed close to the screen. She began to make that same cooing sound that Thompson remembered from the highway, a rhythmic, almost musical pattern that didn't resemble any normal baby noise he'd ever heard. The effect on the bear was immediate and astonishing. Her posture relaxed, the rumbling ceased, and she tilted her head as if listening intently. "Incredible," Thompson breathed, watching the interaction. "It's like they have their own language." "Can you help her?" Rachel asked from inside the doorway, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can you help reunite her with her cub?" Thompson considered the question carefully. The protocol was clear. Escaped bears, especially those that had shown aggression toward humans, were to be recaptured and assessed. If deemed too dangerous, they might never be released back into the wild. The cub would likely be raised in captivity, eventually transferred to a zoo or wildlife sanctuary. But this situation didn't fit any protocol he'd ever encountered. This bear had traveled miles through inhabited areas without incident, apparently with the sole purpose of finding this specific house, this specific child. She hadn't attacked anyone or destroyed property. She was simply waiting, asking for help if the Reeds' interpretation of their daughter's behavior was to be believed. "I might lose my job for this," Thompson said slowly, making his decision. "But yes, I think I can help." He turned back to face the Reeds, his expression serious. "It won't be easy. I'll need to convince my supervisor that the mother bear poses no threat, that she's ready for release along with her cub. The original plan was to release them next week anyway, before she escaped. I might be able to expedite the process, especially if I document her current behavior." "And if that doesn't work?" Nathan asked, one arm protectively around Rachel's shoulders. Thompson's gaze moved to Olivia, who was still communing with the bear through some mysterious channel of understanding. "Then we may need to try something more unconventional." The words hung in the air, pregnant with possibility and risk. What Thompson was suggesting, potentially circumventing official channels to reunite a wild predator with its offspring, could end his career, possibly even result in criminal charges. Yet watching the scene before him, the calm bear, the communicative child, he felt certain that this was no ordinary situation, and therefore required no ordinary solution. "For tonight," he continued, his mind racing ahead to formulate a plan, "the bear needs to leave this area. There are too many people, too many potential conflicts. If anyone else spots her and calls it in, I won't be able to prevent a full capture response." "How do we get her to leave?" Rachel asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "She seems pretty determined to stay near Olivia." Thompson reached into his bag and pulled out a small container. "These are items from the cub's enclosure, bedding material with its scent. I brought them in case we needed to lure the mother. Maybe we can use them to lead her back toward the wildlife corridor away from the neighborhood." "And then what?" Nathan pressed, clearly not satisfied with the temporary solution. "Then I go back to the center in the morning and make my case for accelerating their release," Thompson replied. "I have some influence there. The director respects my judgment. If I can convince her that this bear showed remarkable restraint during her escape, that she poses minimal risk to humans, it's possible we could arrange a supervised release within a day or two." He didn't voice the obvious challenges to this plan, the bureaucratic hurdles, the skepticism he would face from colleagues, the risk to his professional reputation. Some things were better left unsaid. "Olivia will know if it works," Rachel said with surprising confidence. "She'll tell us if the bears are together again." Thompson raised an eyebrow but didn't question her certainty. After what he had witnessed today and 3 weeks ago on the highway, he was becoming increasingly open to possibilities that fell outside his scientific training. "Let's focus on tonight first," he said, returning his attention to the bear. "We need to lead her away from here, back toward the greenbelt. I'll use the scent markers to create a trail." As they prepared to implement this plan, Olivia suddenly became agitated. She pushed against the screen door, her face scrunched in what looked like frustration rather than fear. "Bear, go," she said, her voice rising. Bear, go, baby. Rachel knelt beside her daughter, trying to interpret this new message. I think she's saying the bear needs to go to her baby, like right now. Thompson shook his head reluctantly. The rehabilitation center is locked down tight, especially after today's escape. There's no way to get the cub out tonight without authorization. But Olivia was insistent, her small hands tapping urgently against the screen. Bear, go, baby, she repeated, then added a new phrase. Men, come. Nathan and Rachel exchanged alarmed glances. Men, come, Nathan echoed. What men, sweetie? As if in answer to his question, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night air. Someone else in the neighborhood must have spotted the bear and called emergency services. We're out of time, Thompson said grimly, gathering his equipment. If those sirens are headed here, we've got minutes at most before this place is swarming with police and animal control. The bear had heard the sirens too. She rose to her feet, suddenly alert and tense, her head swiveling toward the sound. Olivia let out a distressed cry, reaching through the screen as if trying to reassure the frightened animal. Bear, go! Bear, go! She's right, Thompson said, making a quick decision. The bear needs to leave now, or she'll be captured or worse. He looked directly at Nathan and Rachel. Do you trust me? They hesitated only briefly before nodding in unison. Then, follow my lead, Thompson instructed, moving toward the far corner of the yard where a gate led to the greenbelt beyond. And bring Olivia. It was a risky move, bringing a baby closer to a potentially dangerous wild animal. But something told Thompson that Olivia's presence would be crucial in guiding the bear away from danger. Nathan scooped up his daughter and followed Thompson, with Rachel close behind. They moved slowly, deliberately, giving the bear plenty of space, while still maintaining the connection that had drawn her here. At the gate, Thompson scattered some of the bedding material with the cub's scent, creating a trail leading into the greenbelt. Now we need to convince her to follow this, he murmured, looking to Olivia. The baby seemed to understand. She leaned forward in her father's arms, stretching toward the bear, and made a new sound. A soft, almost chirping noise that rose and fell in a distinct pattern. The bear's response was immediate. She dropped to all fours and approached the scent trail, sniffing intently. Then she looked up at Olivia as if waiting for confirmation. Go, baby, Olivia said clearly, pointing toward the greenbelt. Find baby. And remarkably, the bear seemed to understand. She turned and lumbered through the open gate, following the scent trail into the darkness beyond. Thompson quickly closed the gate behind her, then ushered the family back toward the house. We need to be inside when the authorities arrive, he explained, his voice urgent, and I need you to follow my lead when they question us. The sirens were closer now, maybe only blocks away. As they hurried back inside, Rachel asked the question that was foremost in all their minds. What happens tomorrow? How do we help the bears reunite? Thompson's face was grim but determined as he closed and locked the back door. I'm not sure yet, but I know we have to try, for the bear's sake and for Olivia's. Because something told him that this strange connection between the baby and the bears wasn't finished yet, that in some mysterious way their fates had become intertwined. And Thompson, a man of science who had just witnessed things that defied scientific explanation, was beginning to believe that sometimes the most important truths were the ones that couldn't be measured or quantified. As blue and red lights began to flash in the front yard, casting eerie shadows through the windows, he steeled himself for the challenge ahead. Whatever happened next, he knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Not for the bears, not for the Reed family, and certainly not for him. The police arrived first. two patrol cars with lights flashing, followed closely by an animal control van. Nathan met them at the front door, his expression carefully composed despite the tension thrumming through his body. "Good evening, officers," he said, trying to sound calm and reasonable. "Thank you for coming so quickly." The lead officer, a stocky man with a weathered face and the name Dempsey on his badge, regarded Nathan with professional suspicion. "We received a call about a bear in the area," he stated. "In your backyard, specifically." Nathan nodded, stepping aside to let the officers enter. "There was a bear, yes. But it's gone now. Ranger Thompson here helped us manage the situation." Thompson stepped forward, presenting his Fish and Wildlife Service credentials. "Daniel Thompson, Senior Wildlife Ranger. I responded to the Reed family's call and successfully guided the animal back toward the Greenbelt without incident." Officer Dempsey studied Thompson's ID carefully before handing it back. "The bear just left? No aggression, no property damage?" "None," Thompson confirmed. "It was remarkably placid, actually, likely just passing through the area on its way back to more suitable habitat." The animal control officer, a younger woman with short blonde hair, looked skeptical. "We received reports that this might be the same bear that escaped from Oak Ridge Rehabilitation Center earlier today. That animal injured 2 staff members during its escape." Thompson nodded, having prepared for this question. "I'm familiar with that incident. The injuries were minor, scratches sustained when the staff members blocked the bear's exit path. Not an attack so much as a panicked response to confinement." He gave her a collegial smile. "You know how these reports get exaggerated." Inside the living room, Rachel sat with Olivia on her lap, the baby now drowsy but still fighting sleep, her eyes drifting occasionally to the window that faced the backyard. Officer Dempsey noticed her. "Ma'am, were you and the child present when the bear was in your yard?" Rachel nodded, stroking Olivia's hair. "Yes, but we stayed inside. The bear never seemed interested in the house, just the edge of our property. It was almost like it was passing through, like Ranger Thompson said." The animal control officer moved to the back door, peering out into the yard. "I should check for prints, assess whether this animal might return." Thompson stepped forward. "I've already documented the evidence for my report," he said smoothly, producing his official notebook. "Standard Fish and Wildlife procedure. I'll be submitting a full report in the morning, with copies to local law enforcement and animal control, of course. It was a subtle power play, a reminder of jurisdiction. Wildlife matters, especially involving protected species like bears, ultimately fell under federal purview rather than local. Thompson was bending the truth. He had no intention of filing the kind of report he was implying, but the bluff might buy them crucial time. Officer Dempsey seemed satisfied, though the animal control officer still looked like she wanted to conduct her own investigation. But without the bear actually present, and with a federal officer already on scene, there was little justification for an extended search. "We'll need to alert the neighbors," Dempsey said, returning to standard protocol. "And I'd advise your family to stay indoors for the next 24 hours until we can confirm the bear has truly left the area." Nathan nodded agreement. "Of course, we're taking this very seriously." After a few more questions and Thompson's assurances that he would personally monitor the situation, the officers finally left. As soon as the door closed behind them, Rachel let out a deep breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was too close," she whispered, hugging Olivia closer. What if they had arrived while the bear was still here? Thompson's face was grim. Then we'd be dealing with a very different situation right now, Most likely a dead bear and a lot of difficult questions. He moved to the window, watching as the patrol cars finally pulled away. We're not in the clear yet. They'll be patrolling the area all night, and tomorrow there will be a full search of the greenbelt. Will she be safe? Nathan asked, meaning the mother bear. If she keeps moving, follows the scent trail deep enough into the wooded areas. Thompson shrugged. Maybe, but eventually she'll circle back, looking for her cub and for Olivia. The implications of that statement hung in the air. The connection between the baby and the bears wasn't just a strange coincidence or a one-time phenomenon. It was persistent, powerful enough to draw a wild animal miles from its natural habitat, through populated areas, to find a specific human child. "What do we do now?" Rachel asked, gently rocking Olivia, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her eyes closed and her breathing deep and even. Thompson checked his watch, nearly 1 a.m. "I need to get back to the rehabilitation center before my absence is noticed. I'll try to check on the cub, maybe set things in motion for an accelerated release." He looked at the sleeping baby in Rachel's arms. "You two should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be complicated." Nathan walked Thompson to the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for believing us, for helping." Thompson paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've spent my life studying wildlife, Mr. Reed. I've seen animals do extraordinary things, things that our science still struggles to explain. But what I witnessed tonight, what I saw 3 weeks ago on that highway," he shook his head slowly, "that's something beyond my experience, beyond anyone's, I'd wager." With that sobering thought, he departed, leaving the Reed family alone with their sleeping daughter and the weight of a mystery that seemed to deepen by the hour. Morning brought clear skies and a neighborhood buzzing with news of the bear sighting. Nathan peered through the living room blinds at a police car slowly patrolling their street, its presence both reassuring and concerning. If the mother bear returned in daylight, there would be no hiding her presence, no way to protect her from capture or worse. Rachel emerged from upstairs looking tired but composed. "Olivia's still asleep," she reported, heading for the coffee maker. She was restless all night, talking in her sleep, making those bear sounds. Nathan joined her in the kitchen, lowering his voice despite the fact that they were alone. "Do you think she knows? About the mother bear, about what might happen?" Rachel measured coffee grounds with mechanical precision, her movements betraying her exhaustion and stress. "I don't know what she knows, Nathan. I don't know how any of this is possible." She closed the coffee maker lid with more force than necessary. "Our baby is somehow communicating with wild bears. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will all have been some bizarre dream." Nathan placed his hands on her shoulders, feeling the tension in her muscles. "I know. It's a lot to process." He hesitated, then added, "But if it is real, if Olivia really does have this connection, don't you think we have a responsibility to help? To at least try to understand it?" Before Rachel could answer, the doorbell rang. They exchanged alarmed glances. Then Nathan moved to check through the peephole. "It's Thompson," he reported with relief, opening the door. The ranger looked even more tired than they felt, his uniform rumpled as if he had slept in it, or more likely, hadn't slept at all. He stepped inside quickly, glancing over his shoulder as if concerned about being seen. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "The director of Oak Ridge has authorized a full capture operation for the escaped bear. They're assembling teams now, bringing in additional rangers from neighboring counties, helicopters, thermal imaging, the works." "That seems excessive for one bear," Nathan observed, leading Thompson to the living room. Thompson's face was grim. It would be, normally. but this morning a hiker reported seeing a bear with a cub near Rockfall Creek. Rachel, who had followed them, looked confused. But the cub is still at the center, isn't it? Yes, Thompson confirmed. I checked its enclosure myself an hour ago, which means there's another bear family in the area, Nathan finished, understanding dawning. And if they find the wrong bear, Thompson nodded. They'll tranquilize it, realize it's not our escaped one, and keep searching. They'll find her eventually. And when they do, protocol will dictate that she be evaluated for potential release or... He didn't complete the sentence, but his meaning was clear. A bear that had escaped once and approached human habitation would likely be deemed too high risk for release. And the cub, Rachel asked quietly, would remain in captivity, probably transferred to a zoo or wildlife sanctuary eventually. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. There has to be something we can do. There is, Thompson said, his voice lowering. But it's risky, possibly illegal, and would definitely end my career if it goes wrong. The Reeds waited, tension building in the silence. We take the cub from Oak Ridge and perform the release ourselves, Thompson finally said. Tonight, before the search teams find the mother. Rachel gasped softly. You mean, steal it? I prefer expedite its release, Thompson replied with a grimace. But essentially, yes. The audacity of the plan left them momentarily speechless. Breaking into a wildlife rehabilitation center to steal a bear cub sounded like the plot of a bad movie, not something rational adults would consider. How would we even do that? Nathan finally asked. And where would we release them? The mother bear could be anywhere in the Greenbelt by now. Thompson leaned forward, his fatigue momentarily forgotten as he outlined his plan. I have access to the center, obviously, and I know the security protocols. As for finding the mother, his eyes drifted toward the stairs. I think Olivia might be able to help with that. Rachel's protective instincts flared immediately. Number. Absolutely not. You're not involving our daughter in some illegal bear heist. I'm not suggesting we take her along, Thompson clarified quickly. But last night she seemed to know the mother bear was coming before she arrived. She knew when the police were approaching. It's as if she has some awareness of the bear's movements, their intentions. It sounded crazy, yet after everything they had witnessed, could they really dismiss the possibility? Even if that's true, Nathan said slowly, and I'm not saying I believe it is, how does that help us? If Olivia can sense the mother bear's location, Thompson spread his hands. We'd know where to bring the cub for the reunion. They were interrupted by the sound of small feet pattering down the stairs. Olivia appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, her blue eyes immediately finding Thompson as if she had been expecting him. "Bear, man," she said clearly, pointing at the ranger. Thompson couldn't hide his surprise at being recognized and named by the child. "Good morning, Olivia," he said gently. Olivia toddled into the room, making her way to Thompson with purpose. She reached out and tugged at his pant leg until he knelt down to her level. "Bear sad," she said, her face solemn. "Bear wait." Thompson glanced up at Nathan and Rachel, then back to the child. "Where is the bear waiting, Olivia? Can you tell me?" Olivia turned and pointed toward the back of the house in the direction of the Greenbelt. "Water, bear by water." "Rockfall Creek," Thompson murmured, a chill running down his spine. The location matched where the hiker had reported seeing a bear that morning, miles from their house. There was no way Olivia could know that through normal means. Nathan and Rachel exchanged stunned glances, their skepticism crumbling in the face of this new evidence of their daughter's inexplicable abilities. "She knows," Rachel whispered. "She really knows." Olivia wasn't finished. She turned back to Thompson and made a gesture like rocking a baby. "Bring baby bear," she said insistently. "Today?" The adults fell silent, the weight of the child's request hanging in the air between them. It wasn't just Thompson's plan anymore. It was Olivia's plea, delivered with a clarity and purpose that belied her young age. "I can't do this alone," Thompson finally said, looking up at Nathan and Rachel. "I'll need help to make this work." Nathan looked at his wife, a silent communication passing between them. Their ordinary life had already been irreversibly altered by the events of the past few weeks. What was one more extraordinary decision in the face of such extraordinary circumstances? "Tell us what you need us to do," Nathan said firmly. Thompson nodded, relief and determination mixing in his expression. "It has to happen tonight. I go back on duty at the center at 8 p.m. The cub is kept in the Small Mammal Recovery Building, which has minimal overnight staffing." He outlined his plan. He would create a diversion that would draw the night staff away from the cub's enclosure. Nathan would drive to the service entrance at the back of the property, where Thompson would bring the cub in a transport carrier. Then they would drive directly to Rockfall Creek, following Olivia's guidance, to release the cub where the mother bear was waiting. "What about the search teams?" Rachel asked, her practical mind already identifying potential problems. "Won't they be patrolling the area, especially near Rockfall Creek if that's where a bear was spotted?" "They'll focus their efforts during daylight hours," Thompson explained. "Too dangerous to track a potentially aggressive bear through the forest at night. They'll set up trail cameras and thermal sensors, but those can be avoided if we're careful." It was a desperate plan, full of potential pitfalls. If they were caught, the consequences would be severe. Thompson would lose his job and possibly face criminal charges, while Nathan and Rachel could be charged with criminal trespass, interference with wildlife management, even child endangerment if it was discovered that Olivia was involved in planning the operation. Yet the alternative, doing nothing, allowing the bears to be permanently separated, ignoring their daughter's apparent distress and concern for the animals, seemed equally impossible. "We'll do it," Nathan decided, looking to Rachel for confirmation. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "For Olivia," she said quietly, "and for the bears." Thompson stood up, his face grave but determined. "I'll make the preparations at the center. Be ready to leave at 9 p.m. Wear dark clothing, and make sure your car has a full tank of gas." As he prepared to leave, Olivia tugged at his pant leg once more. When he knelt down again, she placed her small hand against his cheek, her expression eerily adult in its solemnity. "Bear, say thank you," she said softly. The simple phrase sent a shiver through everyone in the room. It was one thing for a child to develop an unusual fixation on an animal, another entirely for her to claim to be relaying messages from that animal. Yet none of them could bring themselves to dismiss her words as mere childish fantasy. Too much had happened. Too many inexplicable connections had formed for simple explanations to suffice anymore. Thompson patted her hand gently. "Tell the bear we're coming," he replied, treating her statement with complete seriousness. "Tonight." Olivia smiled then, a normal baby smile that transformed her back into an ordinary child. She toddled away to play with a stuffed animal that had been left on the floor, the strange maturity vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. After Thompson left, Nathan and Rachel sat in stunned silence, watching their daughter play as if nothing unusual had happened, as if she hadn't just convinced 3 adults to undertake a potentially criminal rescue mission on behalf of a wild animal. "Are we crazy?" Rachel finally whispered, leaning her head against Nathan's shoulder. "Have we completely lost our minds?" Nathan put his arm around her, drawing her close. "Probably," he admitted. "But I can't ignore what's happening, can you?" Rachel shook her head slowly. Not anymore. She watched as Olivia arranged her stuffed animals in a circle, talking to them in a mixture of real words and baby babble. Whatever this connection is, whatever it means, we have to see it through. They spent the day in a strange limbo, going through the motions of normal family life while secretly preparing for their nighttime mission. Nathan checked and rechecked the car, making sure there was nothing that might attract police attention. Rachel prepared a backpack with essentials: flashlights, water bottles, a first aid kit. Neither spoke much about what they were planning to do, as if putting it into words might make the reality of their situation too overwhelming to bear. Olivia, for her part, seemed unusually content, playing quietly and napping on schedule. The only sign that she was aware of the coming evening's activities was her occasional glance toward the window, followed by a satisfied nod, as if confirming that everything was proceeding according to some plan that only she understood. As the afternoon waned, turning the sky a deep gold that gradually deepened to purple, Nathan found himself standing at the back window, looking out toward the greenbelt. Somewhere out there, a mother bear was waiting, trusting in an inexplicable connection to a human child to reunite her with her baby. It was beautiful and terrifying, and utterly beyond rational explanation. "What have we gotten ourselves into, Liv?" he murmured, as Olivia joined him at the window, reaching up to place her small hand in his. She looked up at him with those clear blue eyes that sometimes seemed to hold ancient wisdom, and said simply, "Help bears, Daddy." "Then go home." Nathan squeezed her hand gently, wondering if she could possibly understand the complexity of what they were about to attempt. "I hope it's that simple, sweetheart. I really do." As darkness fell over the neighborhood, they prepared for what lay ahead, an adventure none of them had sought, but which now seemed as inevitable as the rising of the moon over the silent forest, where a mother bear waited for her cub, and for the strange human family that had somehow become entangled in her fate. The Oak Ridge Wildlife Rehabilitation Center sat on 50 acres of woodland at the edge of the county, its modern buildings partially hidden by tall pines that shielded the recovering animals from the sights and sounds of human activity. At night, with only security lighting illuminating the main pathways, it took on an almost mystical quality. A place where the boundaries between the human and animal worlds grew thin. Nathan parked his car in the shadows beyond the service entrance, exactly as Thompson had instructed, and killed the engine. Rachel sat beside him in the passenger seat, her face pale in the darkness. In the back seat, secured in her car seat despite their earlier agreement to leave her with a neighbor, sat Olivia. The babysitter had canceled at the last minute, leaving them with no choice but to bring her along, a complication that had added significantly to their stress level. "He should be here any minute," Nathan murmured, checking his watch for the third time in as many minutes. It was 9:12 p.m. Thompson was late. Rachel twisted in her seat to check on Olivia, who was quietly alert, her eyes tracking something through the window that neither adult could see. "She's so calm," Rachel observed, "like she knows exactly what's happening." Nathan was about to respond when his phone vibrated with a text message from Thompson. "Security breach alarm triggered in North Sector. All staff responding. Loading dock door unlocked. Come now." "That's our signal," Nathan said, showing Rachel the message. "He's created the diversion." Rachel glanced back at Olivia one more time, then nodded resolutely. "Let's do this." They exited the car quietly, Nathan moving to unbuckle Olivia from her car seat. She came willingly, wrapping her small arms around his neck as he carried her toward the service entrance. The loading dock door was indeed unlocked, just as Thompson had promised. Nathan pulled it open carefully, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. Inside, the corridor was dimly lit by emergency lighting. Thompson had given them detailed directions to the small mammal recovery area where the cub was being kept. They moved silently through the building, each soft footfall seeming thunderous in the quiet facility. Distant alarms could be heard from the north sector, but their area remained eerily silent. "Left at the next junction," Rachel whispered, consulting the hand-drawn map Thompson had provided. Then, through the double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." They followed her directions, tension building with each step. What they were doing was illegal, possibly dangerous, and certainly career-ending for Thompson if they were discovered. Yet it also felt inexplicably right, as if they were following some ancient script written in a language only Olivia could fully understand. The small mammal recovery area was a large room divided into sections, each housing different species in various stages of rehabilitation. Soft animal sounds, whimpers, shuffles, occasional growls filled the space. The bear cub's enclosure was at the far end, a spacious pen with a small shelter and enrichment toys. And there, waiting beside the enclosure with a transport carrier ready, was Thompson. "You made it," he said softly, relief evident in his voice. His eyes widened when he saw Olivia. "You brought her?" "No choice," Nathan explained quickly. "Babysitter fell through." Thompson looked concerned but nodded acceptance. "Maybe it's for the best. She seems to be our best connection to the mother." The cub, hearing their voices, emerged from its shelter. It was larger than Nathan remembered from the highway, but still unmistakably a baby, with oversized paws and a curious, innocent gaze. When it spotted Olivia, it made a soft huffing sound and pressed its nose against the enclosure mesh. Olivia immediately began to make that now familiar cooing sound, a gentle rhythm that seemed to calm the cub instantly. She squirmed in Nathan's arms, clearly wanting to be closer to the animal. "Careful," Thompson cautioned as Nathan hesitantly allowed Olivia to reach toward the mesh, keeping a firm grip on his daughter. Even a cub that size has sharp claws. But Olivia showed no fear, and the cub displayed none of the typical stress behaviors Thompson might have expected. Instead, the young bear pressed its nose gently against Olivia's fingers through the mesh, a moment of connection that left all three adults speechless. "Baby bear come," Olivia said clearly, patting the mesh with her free hand. "Mama, wait." Thompson shook himself from his stupor and moved to open the enclosure. "We need to hurry. The staff will realize the north sector alarm was a false trigger soon." He expertly guided the cub into the transport carrier, a process that would normally require multiple handlers and possibly sedation. Yet the cub went willingly, seemingly comforted by Olivia's continued cooing. "Let's move," Thompson said, securing the carrier door. "Back the way you came to the loading dock. I'll bring my truck around and take the cub from there." They retraced their steps through the quiet facility, the carrier, between Thompson and Nathan, making their progress slower and more awkward. The cub remained remarkably quiet, occasionally making soft chuffing sounds that Olivia would answer with her own strange vocalizations. At the loading dock, Thompson handed Nathan a small device that looked like a garage door opener. "Tracking transponder," he explained. "All released bears wear these embedded in ear tags. This will help us locate the mother if Olivia's connection isn't enough." Then he disappeared into the darkness with the carrier, heading for his Fish and Wildlife Service truck parked on the other side of the building. Nathan, Rachel, and Olivia returned to their own car, the enormity of what they were doing finally beginning to sink in. "We're really doing this," Rachel whispered as Nathan strapped Olivia back into her car seat. "We just helped steal a bear cub from a government facility." Nathan couldn't find words to respond. The situation was so far beyond normal experience that conventional reactions seemed inadequate. He simply nodded and started the car, pulling away from the service entrance as quietly as possible. They rendezvoused with Thompson at the predetermined location, a deserted rural road half a mile from the center. His official truck with the carrier secured in the back pulled out behind them as they headed toward Rockfall Creek. "How will we find the exact spot?" Rachel asked as they drove through the darkness, the headlights cutting a narrow path through the night. The creek runs for miles through the greenbelt. Nathan glanced in the rearview mirror at Olivia, who was now fully awake and alert, her eyes fixed on the passing landscape. "I think our daughter is going to show us." As if confirming his words, Olivia suddenly pointed out the window. "Turn, Daddy, bear there." Nathan slowed the car, peering into the darkness. There was indeed a small forestry access road where Olivia had indicated, barely visible among the trees. He turned carefully onto the rutted path, Thompson's truck following close behind. For nearly 15 minutes, they crept along the narrow road, guided only by Olivia's occasional directions. "Go more," she would say, or "Soon, Daddy." Her confidence was both reassuring and unsettling. A child, not yet a year old, directing adults through a dark forest in search of a wild predator. Finally, they reached a small clearing near where the access road approached Rockfall Creek. Olivia became visibly excited, bouncing in her car seat and pointing ahead. "Stop! Bear here!" Nathan brought the car to a halt, exchanging a nervous glance with Rachel. Thompson pulled up beside them, cutting his engine. For a moment, they all sat in silence, the only sounds the soft bubbling of the creek and the rustling of leaves in the night breeze. "I don't see anything," Rachel whispered, peering through the windshield into the dark clearing. "Let me check," Thompson said through Nathan's open window. "Stay in the car until I determine it's safe." He retrieved a powerful flashlight from his truck and swept its beam across the clearing. The light revealed nothing but grass, rocks, and the occasional small shrub. The creek glittered at the far edge, its water black in the darkness. "Are you sure this is the place, Olivia?" Thompson asked, returning to their car. Olivia nodded emphatically. "Bear hiding, bear scared." Thompson considered this, then made a decision. "I'm going to take the cub out of the carrier and place it near the creek. If the mother is nearby, that might draw her out." "Is that safe?" Rachel asked, glancing nervously at the surrounding darkness. "No," Thompson admitted frankly. "But neither is keeping a wild bear cub in captivity when its mother is free and searching for it. We've come this far. We need to follow through." The adults exited the car, Nathan carrying Olivia despite Rachel's whispered protests that she should stay secured in her seat. Something told him that his daughter needed to be part of this final stage, that her presence was crucial to the success of their mission. Thompson carefully removed the transport carrier from his truck and carried it to the edge of the clearing, near the creek. The cub inside had become more active, sensing the change in its surroundings. Soft grunts and shuffles emanated from the metal box as Thompson set it down and prepared to open the door. "Stand back," he warned, unlatching the carrier. "Once I release it, move slowly back toward the vehicles." Nathan held Olivia securely as Thompson opened the carrier door and quickly retreated. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then a small dark shape emerged cautiously from the carrier, nose twitching as it sampled the night air. The cub took a few hesitant steps, then stopped, looking around in apparent confusion. It made a soft mewling sound, a call for its mother that sent shivers down the human spines. Nothing answered. The cub called again, louder this time, its distress evident. Still, the forest remained silent. "Maybe we're wrong," Rachel whispered, her voice tense with worry. "Maybe the mother isn't here." Olivia suddenly squirmed in Nathan's arms, clearly wanting to be put down. "Olivia, go," she insisted. "Call Bear." "Absolutely not," Nathan replied firmly, tightening his hold. "You're staying right here with me." But Olivia was determined. She began to make her cooing sound louder than before, a rhythmic pattern that carried through the still night air. The cub immediately turned toward the sound, its attention fixed on the humans. And then, from the darkness beyond the creek came an answering call, a low, rumbling sound that was unmistakably a mother bear. "She's here," Thompson breathed, his hand moving instinctively to the tranquilizer gun he'd brought as a precaution. "Nobody move." The cub heard its mother's call and responded with excited bouncing, turning in circles as it tried to locate the source of the sound. It called again, its voice gaining confidence. The mother's response was immediate. Another rumble, closer this time. Then, at the edge of the clearing, a large shape emerged from the darkness. The mother bear moved slowly, cautiously, her nose testing the air, her eyes reflecting the distant flashlight beam as twin points of light. Olivia's cooing intensified, and Nathan felt his daughter's body relax in his arms, as if some invisible tension had finally released. The cub spotted its mother and froze momentarily, then began loping toward her with obvious joy. The humans watched in silent wonder as mother and cub reunited in the center of the clearing. The larger bear thoroughly sniffed and examined her baby, chuffing softly as if confirming its identity and checking for injuries. The cub pressed against her legs, making excited little sounds that needed no translation, the joy of a child reunited with its parent. Only when she was satisfied that her cub was unharmed did the mother bear turn her attention to the humans. She rose to her full height, towering over her cub, and stared directly at them, or, more specifically, at Olivia. Nathan felt his heart hammering in his chest, adrenaline urging him to run despite Thompson's earlier warning to stay still. The bear could cover the distance between them in seconds if she charged. Yet something held him in place, the same inexplicable certainty that had guided them this far. Olivia raised her small hand in what almost looked like a wave. "Bye-bye, bear," she said clearly. "Go home now." And remarkably, as if understanding the child's words, the mother bear dropped back to all fours. She nudged her cub gently, guiding it toward the creek and the forest beyond. At the edge of the clearing, she paused one last time, looking back at the humans, at the small child who had somehow facilitated this reunion against all odds and logic. Then, with a final soft grunt, she disappeared into the darkness, her cub following close behind. For several long moments, none of the adults spoke, the magnitude of what they had just witnessed leaving them temporarily speechless. It was Olivia who broke the silence, a normal baby giggle bubbling from her lips as she clapped her hands together in evident delight. "Bears, go home," she announced happily. "All done." Thompson was the first to recover, already shifting into professional mode despite the extraordinary nature of the event. "I need to activate the tracking transponder," he said, moving back toward his truck. "Make sure they're heading deeper into the protected wilderness area, away from human habitation." Nathan and Rachel followed. Nathan, still carrying Olivia, who had laid her head on his shoulder, suddenly drowsy now that her mysterious mission was complete. "I still can't believe what just happened," Rachel murmured, reaching out to stroke Olivia's hair. How did she know? How could she possibly know where the bear would be, what to say, how to call to them? Nathan had no answer, only a growing awareness that their daughter possessed something extraordinary. an ability or connection that defied rational explanation. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a glimpse into mysteries most humans never encountered. Thompson returned with the tracking device, its small screen showing a blinking dot moving steadily away from their location. "They're heading northeast, deeper into the wilderness preserve," he reported with evident relief. "If they keep that trajectory, they'll be well away from populated areas by morning." "So it worked," Nathan said, still trying to process everything that had transpired. "We actually did it." Thompson nodded, his expression a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal wonder. "We did, against all odds and several federal regulations." He glanced at Olivia, now sleeping peacefully on Nathan's shoulder. "Thanks to your daughter." As they prepared to leave, Thompson paused, his face becoming serious again. "You understand that no one can ever know about this. Not just because of the legal implications for me, but because of what it might mean for Olivia." Nathan and Rachel both nodded, understanding immediately. If word got out about their daughter's unusual abilities, her life would never be normal again. She would become a subject of scientific curiosity, media attention, perhaps even fear or suspicion. "We'll never tell anyone," Rachel promised. "This stays between us." Thompson seemed satisfied with their assurance. "I'll file a report stating that the mother bear returned to the center on her own and was reunited with her cub under controlled conditions. Then both were released in accordance with the original plan. It's not entirely a lie, just an acceleration of the intended timeline." They parted ways at the forest access road, Thompson heading back toward the rehabilitation center to establish his alibi, the Reed family turning toward home. As they drove through the quiet night, Olivia slept peacefully in her car seat, her face relaxed and innocent in the glow of passing streetlights. "What happens now?" Rachel asked softly, breaking the contemplative silence that had fallen between them. Nathan considered the question, its implications extending far beyond the events of this one night. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't think there's a parenting book for what to do when your baby can talk to bears." Despite the tension and uncertainty of their situation, Rachel couldn't help but laugh, a release of stress and wonder that filled the car. "No, probably not," she agreed, reaching for his hand across the console. "But we'll figure it out together." As they drove home, the mystery of their daughter's extraordinary connection to the bears remained unexplained, but no longer felt frightening. Whatever gift Olivia possessed, it had allowed them to witness something miraculous. A bridge between human and animal worlds that few would ever experience. 5 years passed. The events of that night at Rockfall Creek faded into a family story that was rarely mentioned outside their home, but never forgotten. The Reeds had moved to a house with more land on the outskirts of town, where the forest came right up to their backyard. It felt right somehow, to be closer to the wilderness. Olivia grew into a bright, curious kindergartner with a continued affinity for animals, though her mysterious bear communication abilities had never manifested again, at least not in such a dramatic fashion. She still had an uncanny way with wildlife. Birds would land near her, deer would allow her surprisingly close, and the family's 2 rescue dogs followed her everywhere with devoted attention. On a crisp autumn morning, Nathan was making pancakes while Rachel helped Olivia get dressed for school. Through the kitchen window, he noticed movement at the edge of their property where the forest began. Probably just deer, he thought, pouring more batter onto the griddle. But something made him look again. There, partially hidden by the trees, stood 2 bears, one large, one smaller. Even from a distance, he could see the tag in the mother's ear, the same one Thompson had placed years ago. Nathan froze, spatula in hand, as Olivia came bounding into the kitchen. "Daddy, can I have blueberries in my—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes drawn to the window. A slow smile spread across her face, not one of surprise but of recognition. "They came to say goodbye," she said simply. Rachel entered the kitchen and immediately spotted the bears. She gasped softly, her hand finding Nathan's arm. "Goodbye?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Olivia moved to the window, placing her small hand against the glass. "Baby Bear is all grown up now. They're going to the mountains. The far mountains." She turned to look at her parents, her blue eyes holding that strange wisdom they occasionally glimpsed. "They wanted to say thank you." Outside, the mother bear rose briefly on her hind legs, her powerful form silhouetted against the morning sky. The smaller bear, no longer a cub but a juvenile, nearly adolescent, remained on all fours, its head raised toward the house. For a long moment they stood there, as if allowing themselves to be seen, to be recognized. Then, with the same deliberate movement Nathan remembered from years ago, the mother bear dropped to all fours and nudged her offspring. Together they turned and disappeared into the deeper forest. Nathan and Rachel exchanged glances, a wordless communication passing between them. Wonder, confirmation, and a deep sense of having been part of something larger than themselves. "Will they come back?" Rachel asked softly. Olivia shook her head, already returning to thoughts of breakfast and school. They're going home to the big mountains. But it's okay." She climbed onto her chair at the table, swinging her legs as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. "They'll remember us, and we'll remember them." As Nathan resumed making pancakes and Rachel poured juice for their daughter, life settled back into its comfortable routine. But they knew their family carried a secret, a memory of connection that defied explanation, a reminder that the world contained mysteries science couldn't explain and wonders that appeared in the most unexpected places. Sometimes those wonders appeared on busy highways or in suburban backyards, or through the eyes of a child who could, for one brief and magical time, speak the language of bears.